So, you want to make a custom level for Quaternion. Well, hello. This is WhirlyGig231, and in this video I'm going to show you the basic process of making a custom level for Quaternion. Now, I'm going to give you a little disclaimer in advance. I've never actually done this. This level I make in this video, live, will be the first custom level ever made for Quaternion. So we're going to have some fun with this. But if I have a lot of trouble figuring something out, don't worry, I'll just cut the video there. I doubt that will be necessary, though. So the first thing to know is that making a custom level for Quaternion is a lot more complicated than just making a custom, a custom level in some other version of Marble Blast. The reason for this is that, well, there's just a lot more logistical stuff to deal with. A lot of Quaternion levels have custom code, so you have to figure out how to make do with that. So if I open up, there are a few tools you're going to need. Quite a few, actually. Number one, you're obviously going to need Quaternion itself. And in fact, in the game, in order to play custom levels, you have to, I think you have to first actually beat the game. So if you haven't beaten the game yet, you can just edit your save file manually. Cheating. The next thing you're going to need is some form of text editor, because a lot of the editing of levels will take place in the code. So if I open up, for instance, a level, on my computer it's going to open in Notepad++. If you're on Windows, I highly recommend Notepad++. If you are not on Windows, then, if you're on Mac, I've heard Text Wrangler is a good choice, but anything that has, anything that's designed to work with code should work very well. Here, for instance, is the misfile for Orthoplex Temple. As you can see, there's a lot of custom code and such, and as you can see, it's almost 10,000 lines long. The level we make will not be 10,000 lines long, don't worry. It will be much shorter than that. But you will definitely want to be able to do some manual editing of code in the misfile. The next thing you're going to need is a method of making map files. In particular, I have Torque Constructor. You can use Torque Constructor if you want. You can use Quark. Anything that can make map files. Another thing you're going to need is if you want to add DTSs to your level, and all of the standard Quaternion levels include some form of custom DTS at some point. It's pretty much the de facto standard for Quaternion when it comes to making custom, when it comes to adding things to your level, because all of the standard Quaternion levels have, different features in them. So what I use to make DTS files is I use Blender. If I type Blender in here, it's going to give me Blender 2.7, but I actually use 2.49 simply because the DTS exporter for it works better. So this is Blender 2.49. As you can see, I've already got the UV editing window open here. There are a couple of exporters you're going to need. You're going to need the DTS exporter, which is called Torque Shape DTS. If you don't have that, you can find it somewhere on the forums. The original website for it, I think, has been completely taken down, but there are a ton of copies of it that people have floating around. Ask me, ask RD. If you can't find it on the forums, I'm sure you can find a copy of this quite easily. And obviously, it's not like this is breaking any sort of law. To my knowledge, there isn't any necessarily, proprietary license on distributing this exporter. You'll also need raw faces export. That should come with Blender by default, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. The one other exporter you might need is this export called Convex Hull Binary, or CHB. That's actually a tool that I developed, and I haven't released it publicly. So if you need it, you're going to have to ask me for it, but you should only need that in very specialized circumstances. I'll get to that much later in the video. You won't need that in most levels. I think there are 2 levels in Quaternion that I use CHB export for. So, the other thing you'll need, you will need a copy of Marble Blast Map to Diff, or some equivalent utility. I know Map to Diff Plus has been kind of popular in the past. I know Hi Guy has probably 3 hacked together versions that are supposed to be better than Map to Diff. Any way of converting a map file to a diff file reliably should work fine. And in fact, you don't even really need to worry about missing faces or brushes as much, because this won't affect collision. Diff files in Quaternion do not determine collision in the physics sense. They only determine the way an object looks on screen. Fun fact. The last thing you'll need is you'll need a tool called Diff Inspector. This is actually an old version that I use. Diff Inspector is used to convert files from diff to raw, among other things, and MatP actually has a version of that on vortexgames.org. If you go here, interested in Diff Inspector, you click this, and you can download Diff Inspector. So those should be all the tools you need, and you probably realize this is in fact a wide assortment of tools. And if there are even more tools depending on what else you want to do. Like, you want to have custom music? Perfect, you need a music editor. You want to have custom textures? Perfect, you need an image editor. If you want recommendations as to what to do for any of that, let me know. I've got you covered. But without further ado, let's actually make a freaking level. So the first step to making a level will be actually, well, making the level file. I don't necessarily have a very good template to start with. What I'm going to start from is I'm going to start from this test level. If you are looking for a better template, what I will do is after I make this video, in addition to the video, I will actually release the level I've made so that you can just take it and use it as a template and go from there. So from this, we're going to take this entire folder and copy it into custom levels. As you might be able to tell here, convention in Quaternion is to give each level its own folder. And if you open one of these folders, you'll see why. There are generally a lot of things involved in a level. Yeah, here is every piece of every wire puzzle in Tower of Winds. Have fun. So we're just going to put the whole freaking thing in here. There's this README here saying, hey, if you want a detailed description of how to make custom levels, send me a message. Well, if you do send me a message, I'll just tell you, watch this video. So, yeah. So in here, we've got a bunch of files. We are not going to need all of these. In fact, pretty much the only file we're going to keep is this level.mis here. And even that we're going to change around. So let's open up level.mis first off, just to make some initial adjustments to it. Obviously, all this information here is not as it should be. I'm going to say this right away. Type, you don't need, get rid of it. Level, I don't think you need, get rid of it. Gold time, you also don't need. There will be a replacement for gold time. I will point that out later. Artist you're going to want to modify, so I'm going to make myself the artist. Name you're going to modify. Oh, start help text also. You don't need. Name you're going to modify. I'm going to call this level custom level example. An example custom level. Alright, now I have no idea whether Quaternion is going to recognize this custom level, but we'll play it by ear. Alright, now I'm going to open up this menu, and under custom levels, here we go, custom level example. As you can see, there is currently no quantum time, because we didn't set one. That's another field you can set. And there are also no ion cells, but it assumes you're going to have 5 ion cells, so okay. So let's open up this example, and as you can see, it starts us in time attack mode, and here we are. By the way, if you've ever wondered if the Ionic Press channel video, if that actual press still exists in the game, if you have the developers build, it does. It's right here. If you have the regular Windows build, then I removed it because I didn't need it for any reason. So this is the test level. Nothing much to say about it really at the moment. We are going to replace this with a better level. And we're going to do that as follows. So the first thing we need is some sort of interior so that you can actually, you know, roll around. I mean, the level had one already, but we're going to make a better one, and I'm going to show you what the process is for that. So Constructor is fortunately still open. We are not going to use PQ textures. We're going to use Quaternion textures. Generally speaking, the texture you want to use is grid. There are 2 textures. Okay, well, this level is actually an exception. But there are generally 2 textures in a level. You have grid and grid block. Grid is the color that most things are made of, and grid block is the color that the other things are made of. So, for instance, if we look in the level Tower of Winds, for instance, grid is... Here we go. Grid is the dark bluish purplish color that most of the level is, you know, textured with. And then grid block is this light yellow green. So we're just going to copy over the ones from... just delete all this. We're just going to copy over the ones from Nexus. This blue and orange color scheme that Valve should totally not sue me over. And, right, so we're going to make a level in Constructor, a very simple level. Let's say I have an idea for how this level should go. So for the most part, building a level in this is going to be the same as building any other level. The main difference is that the texture scales are way different because the textures are bigger. So ordinarily you'd have to set it to 0.5 and 0.5. Here you actually have to set it to 0.125 and 0.125 to get the correct... Wow, that's broken. Good job, Constructor. To get the correct texture scaling on it. Otherwise you'll have that problem like in those really old levels back when people were first figuring out how to use Constructor. You remember that problem where everything would be, all the grid textures would be twice as big as they should? Yeah, we're not going to have that problem. So we're going to make this. And now, let's make a sort of second level here. So I'm going to add some walls. So like I said, for the most part, this is the same procedure as building any other Marble Blast interior. The one difference I will mention is that you should not try to include A, moving platforms, or B, any sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Any sort of, like, object, like, entities. I know there are tools that will let you do that, and if you try to use them in Quaternion, they will probably not work that well. So I'm going to make this nice and tall sort of trough region here. And then I'm going to make another platform back here. You know, sort of scale this appropriately. So the idea here in this part of the level will be that that part over here is a pit of goo. And you obviously don't necessarily want to fall in it. But actually it's not the worst thing in the world if you do, because you could just roll up the other side. So, next up I'm going to sort of start making a bridge across this. And this one I'm actually going to texture with the other grid texture. You can skip ahead a little bit in the video if you're not concerned with the design of the level that I've decided to make just now. Obviously, it's the point of this is to learn about the technical aspects as opposed to the design aspects of Quaternion level building. But if you're interested in what I'm making here, I mean, I'm not trying to make anything special here, just a sort of quick and dirty way of demonstrating how this game works and how you make levels for it. Right, so something like that. Okay. As it stands, you can just go around the outside, can't you? Right, we're gonna add some more wall then. And in fact, we're going to add another wall on top of this. That, and then copy that, and there. Okay, sweet. So that's a nice sort of first challenge. And we probably want to have a way to get back up. Although I guess you could just use the glue either way. This is a very poorly designed level. But hey. I have so many copies of Quaternion hanging around. Alright, so in custom levels, test, we're going to call this cool level.map. That was a bad idea, putting an underscore at the end of it. That can cause issues with map to diff, I've discovered, but no big deal. We can deal with that when we come to it. We'll cross that bridge. Ha! That's kind of funny. Okay. And then, let's actually put a ceiling on this, and we're going to make it so that you have to go up and across the ceiling. And how do you go up? Well, with a moving platform, of course. So I can demonstrate then how moving platforms work in this game. They're a little bit different. I'm going to add sort of a little enclosure here just to remind myself where the platform is going to go, and also because it'll look nice. Because it'll look nice is sort of the motto of a lot of design decisions made for Quaternion. So we're gonna put that like that. Can I? Yes, I got it. Alright, and there! Alright, that's a nice level right there. Nice little level. You come in here, you go through here, you come out here. You get the idea. Right. So I'm going to save that, and now we're going to actually convert it so that we can get it into the game. So, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to use map to diff to make it into a diff. What I typically do is I just take make a new copy of map to diff in the same folder so that I can just drag it in like that. Oh, that actually worked. It must be if you only put a number after the underscore. Huh. Anyway, so now I'm going to open up Diff Inspector. It's going to look a little bit different because, again, this is an older version of it. And we're going to open from this custom level folder the diff, and then we're going to export raw and call it the same thing but with a .raw extension. And it says it was successful. So if you're wondering what a raw file is, it's really basic. It's literally just a list of all of the triangles. And the game Quaternion uses this to just have an easy way to import a shape to use with the physics. And there are some functions that help you with this. In particular, right now we're going to use a function called diffraw. Okay, so diffraw, let me actually search for the exact definition of that function. because I want to make sure I'm getting the syntax of it correct. Okay. By the way, that's a super helpful feature of Notepad++. You can just hit Find in Files, and you find all of it. Interior file equals marble data. Okay. So, the first thing will be the name of the interior. Interiors have names in Quaternion, which is kind of weird, but the reason is because interiors kind of aren't interiors. It's hard to say. So we called it cool level, right? Cool level. And the name, the second argument is the name of the actual diff and raw file. They have to match. And then the third one here, we're actually going to do custom levels/test here. And that tells it what directory it should be looking in for this file. Okay. So, we're going to go in here. And we are going to keep this stuff. We're going to keep the start point, although obviously we're going to have to move it. We can delete that stuff. You'll notice there's some stuff after this. I'm going to forget about that. This onload function, by the way, this might be very helpful to you. If you want to put some custom code in that will get run when the level has finished loading, you can put it in onload. There are a couple of functions like that, actually. And we're going to set the data block of this static shape to cool level. You might find it a little bit strange if you know a little bit about level coding that we're putting in a static shape instead of an interior instance. The reason for that is that all of the physics functionality is actually tied to static shapes. So when you make an interior in Quaternion, you're actually making a static shape that then makes the interior, but the static shape keeps track of all of the interior's physics for it. So now if we open up the game, we are going to load the level, and hopefully all's well and good here. And in fact, we are going to spawn inside the level. Now what's interesting is that we didn't actually spawn on the start pad. You might be wondering why that is. And the reason for it is that, I believe the reason for it is that this start pad does not have an index. So, and let's set the scale to 111. So there's a function called, there's a field called index, which is supposed to be set on start pads. In fact, if we actually want to look for the start pad, we should be able to find it somewhere. Where would that be? It's over here. Oh man, it's tiny. Yeah, the start pad in this level was scaled to 0.05 for some reason. Yep, there it is. Tiny little start pad. Anyway, the reason why it has to have an index is because some levels have multiple start pads. The best example of this is, of course, Nexus. Nexus has more than one start pad, depending on where you are exactly. Okay, so everything looks okay here, except for where we spawned, because we didn't set that index. In fact, if we return to Nexus and then reload this level, you can see we now start on the actual start pad. Now, the other problem is that the start pad isn't in the right place. So we need to know what position this is here. Now, ordinarily, we would be editing this level in the actual level editor. As disappointing as it is to say that, I don't actually recommend doing that in Quaternion necessarily, because a lot of things don't get saved to the misfile correctly. You can feel free to do it. Just be prepared to maybe investigate some bugs that might come up from saving things from the editor. So what I usually do if I want to place something in the level and I want to know where exactly it goes, I use this function called T. You can literally open the console and just type T and hit enter. That's it. And that tells you where the marble is currently. So it looks like 0, -18, and 6 is where we want to put this start pad. Alright, now we can reload the level. Some things later on will require us to reload the entire game to test something, but for now we can get away with just reloading the level. Okay, now that we've loaded the level, here we are. And yeah, you can just jump across here, can't you? That's kind of funny. So, I'm going to demonstrate how to do several things in this level. The first thing I'm going to demonstrate is how to fill this area with glue. That actually gets kind of tricky, because there are shapes for glue in this game. However, there aren't actually any that would fit this exact, these exact dimensions. So ordinarily what you would try doing is you would try opening up an existing level. Like, let's open up, for instance, Islands of Kalas. And there is actually a data block that gets defined in here called glue pool. And it has a DTS, gluepool.dts. The problem with using gluepool.dts is if we check the size of it. Let's go into Quaternion. I do not still have the Blender file for this. Wonderful. Okay, well, it's not the right size. I'll say that much. So what we want to do is we want to actually make a custom DTS for this. So I get to demonstrate how to do that now. It's not that difficult a process. What we're going to do is we're first going to make a plane, and now we're going to scale it to the required size. Actually, we don't want to do that in object mode. Scaling things in object mode is generally a bad idea. We want to do it in edit mode, and so we scale it to 8. And then we want to open up the glue image. Now we're actually going to need to take this glue image, glue.png, and we're going to want to move it into this test level so that we can use it there. So now, if I open it up, that folder in the game, data, custom levels, test, glue.png. And we're going to hit UV unwrap, or actually reset. And if you hit this little thing, you select textured mode, you can get the textured version. This isn't actually the scale we want to use. We want to actually repeat the texture probably 4 times going across. So I'm going to scale the whole thing by, not by a quarter, sorry, by 4. And just to be pedantic, let's move it so that it's centered in the right way. And there you go. There's our floor made of glue. So now what we're going to do is we're going to export a DTS for this. We're not going to add collision. We are going to set this to self-illuminating translucent additive. And we are going to go into this and call it cool pool.dts. And we export it. Now, I'm not going to make a .raw file for this one. If you wanted to use collision, then you'd export a .raw. I'm not going to do that this time. I'll show you how to do that later, probably when we make the moving platform. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of the data for this glue pool, and I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it in at the beginning of this level. And it's called Cool Pool. And plug those in properly. This doesn't actually matter unless you want to put it in from the editor. One interesting thing here is this property called ignore RD. That's actually an important property to put on anything that could severely impact gameplay if you were unable to see it. The way this works is Quaternion will refuse to draw an object if it's too far from the camera. That depends on what your graphics settings are set to. It's just to save on rendering times and reduce lag. Especially Islands of Kalos is a level where lag is a huge issue due to the number of objects. If ignore RD is set to true, though, it won't just make an object invisible if it's too far away. Which is great for things like doors, where you don't want somebody to be able to see through a door just because they're far enough away from it. Glue is obviously another good idea. It'd be a little bit jarring if suddenly you got really far away and, oh, that's not liquid, that's just a gas. So just to run over what the rest of this code is doing, enable on frame is kind of essential for anything that needs to do something every frame. There's an on frame event that will run every frame, but it only runs on objects that call this. The reason being that if you run it on everything, the game lags horribly. So, then all this stuff we don't really have to worry about. The long and short of all this is, look, here's the here's the bounding box of the object, and yeah. And we're going to make sure that the marble is within that bounding box. And if it is, we're going to give it glue. So a lot of this involves just sort of foraging around in the existing Quaternion levels and copying and pasting things. I apologize if you have ideological oppositions to that. So we're going to make another static shape, and we're going to put this one at 0, 0. I think we want to do -1, and we can ignore the index, and we're going to call it Cool Pool. Oh, I didn't actually name this properly. Another thing to keep in mind, you never want these data block names to conflict with any other level that's installed. So if you maybe want to use the same data block as in someone else's level, you have to make sure that it's exactly the same. Otherwise, if somebody tries to play one level and then the other, they're going to have issues. That loud noise you just heard is what happens if you keep controller vibration on and leave your controller sitting on your desk. Alright, so let's see if that worked. Well, I do not see the glue pool. A good thing to do is to sort of open up this and see if anything looks wrong. Importing. Cool level done, and that's a diff. That is strange. We definitely put it in the level. Where is it? You'd get an error if the object literally didn't exist anywhere. You'd get an error that register object failed. Ah, I put it way too low. But if you look, it actually does work. We're rolling on the inside. Right, so I'm really quickly going to fix that. Put it up at z equals 5, I think is the actual correct value. And there we go. Now the glue is in the right place. So there's the glue. We can jump across it. We can jump into it. We can sort of move around. There you go. Okay. Now I'm realizing that you don't need to take the moving platform at all. So yes, this level is going to be very poorly designed from a gameplay perspective. I apologize in advance. But that's how you can get glue in your level. The next thing we're going to add is we're going to add a crate here, so that you can sort of push a crate down and then jump across it as a bridge. Now, ordinarily, I'd have to scour the entire game looking for a crate object to use. Fortunately enough, if we go to this level, which you might recognize, this is still in the developer's build, by the way. So, definitely nice to have the developer's build. You can see we have crates here. They're a little bit strange at the moment. You can jump through them, but we're not going to worry about that. We're going to find those, and we're going to grab them from that other level and put them in this level. So, we're going to need to copy a few files. That would be in lights. So there's the box. Actually, hold on a second. What am I thinking? We don't need to get those. We can get the one from backup power control. I totally forgot there was a box there, which is funny because that's a pretty unforgettable box. So we're going to open up the MIS file for backup power control, which is this. Here we go. Okay. So we're going to take this and we're going to just copy and paste the code. We can copy and paste the code completely unmodified this time. Yes, this means that we are using the same data block name as in another level, but that doesn't actually matter as much because it's exactly the same data block too. So it's called begin box. So we're going to put a begin box in, and we're going to put that at Z needs to be 7, I think, to make sure it's actually on top of the platform. And we're going to put it at 0, -5. All right, and let's see if that worked. And indeed, it did. We've got this nice box here. We can push it and everything. Isn't that great, kids? Oh, we kind of pushed it a little bit too far. And now it's sliding over there. And this actually demonstrates a really important thing to keep in mind. Generally speaking, it's a bad idea to use dynamic objects like this crate in the same level as something like glue. As anything that gives you glue, because glue, the way it works, it actually modifies the gravity. And in my infinite programming foresight, I did not make that a local change. I made it global, so it will change everything's gravity. So if I want to like go up this wall, it will make me get attracted to the wall, which in turn means everything is attracted to the wall, meaning that if we look, yeah, the crate's now over here because it fell, and I can in fact push it off, and it will sort of keep going. So yeah, that's a little bit broken. But if you want, I can try to get that fixed for V1.1 or 1.2. So there are just a couple of things like that to keep in mind. You're probably interested as to how exactly we made the box dynamic in the first place. Let me just really quickly show you the code for that. First off, all of this you don't have to worry about because basically the whole thing that this does is... oh, actually this we do have to worry about. Because this will say that if we push the box off the level, it'll think we're in backup power control. So, yeah, I'm going to delete that, and because I've now changed the code, I'm going to change the data block name as well. so that this is now begin box 2. And so really the only thing about the code that determines that this is a dynamic object is this right here. In fact, it's this line. Literally the only thing you have to do to make an object dynamic. Set its mass to something positive when you define the data block. In fact, you want to see something funny. If I go in here and before that start point gets defined, if I say start point dot or start pad dot bt mass equals 1. Actually, never mind. If I do that, it's going to give me an error because yeah. I'll explain why that is later on. But in any case, so yeah. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to make a moving platform to take you up to the top floor. So, first off, we're going to actually make the platform. I'm going to make it in Blender this time just to demonstrate. Scale it by 4 in every direction except Z. And then I'm going to open up grid block. Set that as the active texture, UV reset. And you'll notice that looks like this, which is terrible. So I'm going to select the top and bottom faces and scale the texture by 4 and shift it. And then these, it's always a bit of a crapshoot whether you want to scale it in the X or in the Y. Oh, another important thing. When you hit the button to scale, make sure you have the mouse cursor over this side. But, I mean, that's just a general Blender tip, I guess. Alright, and now we're going to export this DTS. We're going to export this. We are going to add collision this time. Note that collision here does nothing to collision in the game as far as the physics are concerned. But what it does affect is whether or not the camera can go through something. There are actually a couple of shapes in the game where that's set incorrectly. Have fun trying to figure out which ones those are. Cool MP. Alright, I've exported the DTS. Now to export the .raw. A couple of things you have to keep in mind when using Blender's .raw exporter. Number one, it only works on one object. So you have to select every object and merge them with Control-J. In this case, we only have one object, so we don't have to worry about it. Number two, Blender's raw files will include tetragonal faces. That's the word I'm looking for. Gosh. But Quaternion will only understand raw files with triangular faces. So in edit mode, you want to select everything and hit Control-T to make all of the faces triangles. And now we're going to export as raw. And we're going to export that as coolmp.raw. Okay, so now that we have our coolmp, this is not the right folder. There it is, coolmp, DTS, and raw. We're going to use a function, and the one we're going to use this time is called DTSRaw instead of diffraw. Who would have known? CoolMP, CoolMP. Literally that simple. And then we can put the CoolMP over in the level. I'm not sure what the exact position of it needs to be. 5 is correct on the Z. As for the Y, let's put it at 20 and see where that puts us. It's phasing through the platform. Wonderful. Well, so much for using it as a step. Okay, so here's the moving platform. You'll notice that it doesn't move at all. However, it does have collision, so that's good. So the next thing we have to do is make this thing actually move up and down. This is going to get a little bit tricky. Generally, the way we're going to do this is as follows. First off, it's 2885. I'm going to put a couple of commands in the console. You wouldn't actually need to do this. I'm just doing this to sort of test how this works. So 2885. So there's a function bt create and then various types of movement. If I do bt create linear movement 2885.bt body, what I've just done is made it so that we can move this object linearly. So I can set its velocity to 0, 0, 1, and it will move upwards, as evidenced by the fact that I no longer collide with it. You might wonder, why does it still look like it's down here? Well, that's because we also have to do two other things to it. We have to call enable on frame, and we have to set a variable on it called skip update to 0. And now it will actually update its position. That's not done by default, because if I did it by default, it would, lag the game, because there are a lot of things in this game that don't move. Most things in this game don't move, and it would be foolish to try to update their positions every frame when they don't move. So you can see the thing's actually moving now, which is great. Let's see, we're going to want to move that 3 tiles in that direction. By the way, if you've ever tried to do a trap launch, yeah, it just crushes your marble. So, we're going to close the game for now. And the cool... actually, we won't need to give it a name. So we're going to put it at 26. And the next thing we're going to do is we are going to make a path. Yes, just like in just like Grandma used to make. No, just like in MBG. The one thing that I'm not sure if it is the same as MBG is the fact that after the last path node, it will not like just jump back to the first one. It will actually go back to the first one smoothly. So we're going to make a path, and we're going to call this cool MP path. And we're going to put some markers in it. We don't have to give them names. Let's make it 5,000 between them. And we're going to put the first one at 0.26.5. And the second one at 0.26... what is it? I'm going to try 13, see if that works. Okay, make sure the sequence numbers are set properly. And again, we're doing this all manually. You could try to do this in the editor if you wanted to, and I think in this level that wouldn't actually break anything, but I'm just not 100% certain. So, now we have to add an onAdd event to CoolMP. And what this will do is, as soon as that moving platform gets added to the level, we have to essentially tell it that it's a moving platform and it needs to move on the right path. The first thing to do not forget to do this, ever, is to add this parent function. Whenever you override a callback like onAdd, onFrame, I actually didn't do it on this one, that might not have been a good idea, always call the parent function. And the reason for that is because otherwise, all of the other stuff that would happen in script when the object gets added doesn't happen anymore. Which includes such things as making the object have physics, because that's done in script. So, we want to make sure that that doesn't, mess things up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do, first off, we do have to still do enable on frame, and skip update equals 0. And then bt create, we're going to create a pathed movement on this one. Objects bt body, and the path we want it to move on, which in this case is CoolMP path. And if I did that correctly, we'll see if I did. Right, it's not moving. Sweet. Path not found. Ah, I know why it's not moving. Because the path needs to exist before the moving platform does. Otherwise, it's going to try to say move along this path, but the path hasn't been made yet. So what I did there, what I just did is literally just made it so that it creates the path and then creates the moving platform. Another way you could get around that is you could, instead of setting it to follow that path in the actual onAdd callback, you could do it in the function onLoad. OnLoad gets called after all of the objects in the level already exist. Okay, looks like this platform doesn't quite go high enough, but that's okay, because we can ride it now. And it works just like the moving platforms you know and love. I mean, apart from the whole trap launching kills your marble thing. So, it doesn't quite go high enough, so I'm going to make it go high enough. But I'm also going to do a neat little thing here. I'm going to do that and see if that works. Just to demonstrate something, to prove a point. And that point I am proving is that rotating platforms totally work in Quaternion without any additional hassle. Just you give the markers different rotations and the thing rotates. It's that simple. I don't actually like the fact that it overlaps the platform, so I'm going to actually turn this into a 6 marker path. You know what? Too much effort. Let's keep things simple and just demonstrate more of how to make a level. So, the one thing missing from the level at this point is the actual finish. So, how are we going to do that? Well, as you will see, it's quite simple. There's a thing called Ion Pack Item E, and we are going to put that in this level. Nope, that's a different level. And so we're going to make this ion. We're not going to give it a name. You would give it a name if you wanted to, for instance, make it hidden when the level starts. In fact, we're also going to delete that. Hidden equals 1. And then you have to make it appear by doing something, like in the standard Quaternion levels. And we're going to put this item same place as the start pad, but higher up. So the start pad was at 0, negative 18, 6, so we're going to put it at 0, negative 18, 17. Data block has to be Ion Pack Item E. Skin is just whatever color you want it to be. I'm going to set it to the base skin, which I think makes it blue. We'll see if I'm right. Well, let's see if there's an ion pack up there for us to get. There is, and it is blue. And when we pick it up, congratulations, new best time for the level. Oh. Okay. Note to self, restart time attack button is broken in custom levels. That will be fixed for 1.1. In fact, I'll fix that right after I'm done making this video. So, Oh, and it also didn't set the best time properly. Ouch. It probably set the best time for that weird other level. Actually, what I will say right now is a way you could fix this, partially, is by giving your level a level number. Just make it something really high that nobody else is going to use. Anyway. Regardless, here's this level, and everything in the level is working right now. There are a few things that we probably want to add to the level that it doesn't have yet. Number one is we probably want to have a bounds trigger. So that doesn't happen. So, to make a bounds trigger is actually incredibly simple because, fun fact, it works almost exactly the same way as it does in MBG. So we're going to make this trigger, let's make it go negative 20 to 20. Let's make it go from negative 40 to 40 on the Y. And let's make it go from 0 to, yeah, sure, 50 on Z. And that's literally all you need to do, and your level will have bounds, and they will work like they do in the other levels. I shouldn't speak too soon. Let me actually check this. Yep. Works just like you expect. You can still go down here, right? Yep, okay. There's actually an amusing glitch involving the way glue is programmed that will come up in this level, which is that most glue pools, this doesn't happen for some of them, you have to give them an actual depth, but as it stands, this doesn't know where the bottom of the glue pool is, so we can fall out of bounds into glue if we go at it with the right angle. Fortunately, it is actually very hard to get the angle right. There we go. We just got glue. For no reason. Pretty funny. And did we just start to roll on something? That is strange, but in any case. So that's... Alright, so that's how that works. Let's say you want to create something else. For instance, here's something this level is missing. Ion cells. The thing still seems to think this level has 5 of them. So, let's add some ion cells. 9, 9, and 17 would be coordinates for one. So, you can search for ion cell in one of these, or you can just get them from this level, because like I said, I'm going to release this level. So, the ion cell, the important part of the ion cell is this index. You want this index to be 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 for some of the ion cells in your level. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's how the game distinguishes which ion cell is which. It could theoretically just do this by position, but then that would cause issues, because let's say you move an ion cell when you're designing a level, and oh no, suddenly the game doesn't think you have it anymore. So now this level should have ion cells. In fact, we can see them up there, if you sort of look up. By the way, I mentioned earlier CHB files and when you would use them. I will say this. You should never need to worry about it for most applications. It's a very specialized thing. Actually, I should talk about that, shouldn't I? Yes, I should talk about that. So let's pick up this. And it still isn't saving the information properly. So, there are different types of shape in the physics engine that this game uses. And in particular, the different types of shape mean that there are there are limitations on which ones you can have doing what. For instance, let's say I want that moving platform object. Let's say I want that to actually be a dynamic object instead of a static one. So I just set its mass to something not equal to 0. That tells it that it's a dynamic object. Okay, you'll notice first off that the platform isn't moving. And secondly, you'll notice that I go straight through it. And if you go to see why, oh, you'll notice we're getting lots of fun errors in the console. Invalid body handle means that it's trying to load, like it's trying to move the platform, but the platform doesn't actually have a physics body, so it fails. And you'll see why right here. Dynamic objects cannot use raw meshes. And that's an unfortunate truth of bullet physics. You cannot use the raw format for collision on an object that has a dynamic mass. The reason for that is a little bit complicated, but here's how to get around it. Number one, this object in particular is a box. So instead of using a raw file, what we could do is we could use this bt shape type equals box, and instead of specifying a file for it, you specify what size it is, just X, Y, and Z, and this is half extent. So if it's 4 torque units wide, a torque unit being half of a grid tile, then you would make it 2. Or you could just think of this as width in grid tiles. That also works. Oh, and also you probably want to set these if you're setting something's mass. It's friction and it's restitution. Actually, it doesn't matter. Those would be set anyway. But you definitely want to set its restitution to something other than the... No, what am I saying? Restitution's fine. It's friction that you have to worry about, because if you set the friction to the default, which I think is 1.1, it gets messy. But anyway, in any case, the other thing you can do, if your shape is more complicated than a box or a sphere is also available, I forget whether there's a cylinder type, I think there is, what you can do is you can use a CHB. And let me demonstrate how you make a CHB. First off, you ask me for the CHB export utility, then you go to export a CHB, and then you export the CHB. Literally that simple. The key to keep in mind is that CHBs work a little bit differently. They're based off of convex hulls. So, let me demonstrate what I mean by that. If I take this, and if I just draw some vertices here, right? The CHB of this will be a solid four-sided figure. Like this is a solid four-sided pyramid, even though it doesn't look like it. Because what it's doing is it's not actually considering the faces, rather it's just taking into account everything that's in between these 4 points, which includes the entirety of this solid shape. Now you might not necessarily want that. What if, for example, we want to have something like this? If we include everything that's in between any of the vertices, this hole in the center will be filled, which is very unfortunate. So what you want to do in this case is you want to split it up into multiple objects, and it'll export one convex hull for every object. So in this case, what you'd have to do is you have to select every segment here, and then hit the P key to make that a separate object. And that in itself is convex, so that's fine. And then repeat that for all of them. Obviously, as this goes on for large shapes, you could get a lot of objects in the process, which would result in a very slow and laggy game. So let me actually show you. I don't know if I can import it. Yeah, here it is. The giant propeller in the middle of Tower of Winds actually uses a CHB, and this is what its mesh looks like. As you can see, each half of the propeller is split up into several different objects, each of which is individually convex. I actually didn't do that manually. I used a utility for it that uses a fancy algorithm to try to do it. I would, if you would like to do something like this, talk to me. I can get you hooked up with that utility, and I can sort of teach you the ropes of using that. But this is something that comes up very rarely. Like that utility, this is the only shape in Quaternion that I used it on. So that's what you do if you want to have something that's convex and yet, that isn't convex and yet moves. Another example of where I use this is the little dumbbell-shaped switches in Endless Forest that you pull on to get the engines to turn on. Again, that's a concave shape, so I had to split it up into 3 cylinders, and then the in-game physics just, it defines a separate convex shape for each cylinder. So, that's a little bit more advanced, obviously. Some other things you might want to do, again, just the key to this is to look through other levels and find things. Let me really quickly copy the quantum giving objects from the other levels, just so that you know what you're doing using them. So the one in Blast, the one for Orthoplex Temple is called a Blast Giver. So we're going to sort of see here. Actually, I'm not going to actually include them in the level. That would probably bloat it a bit. But it's called Blast Giver. So you find all the code relevant to Blast Giver. Here's the rest of it, and you put it in. In Islands of Kalos, I've already demonstrated how that works. In Tower of Winds, I believe they are called Copter Rings. Yes, here's Copter Ring. Here's the rest of its code. You include that in your level. In Endless Forest, they are called, I believe, Hook Pads. Yep, there's Hook Pad. Here's the code for it. And you include that in your level. And then in the final level of the game, you have leap points. And I forget whether leap points are defined in the level or whether they're actually in the... Yeah, no, they're not actually defined in the level. They're actually, the code for them is all elsewhere. So you can literally just make something and call it a leap point. And there you have it. So, that is, in short, how to make levels for Quaternion. I hope you... Oh, there is one more thing I want to explain how to do. I actually forget what the exact variable name is for this, so give me 1 second while I look it up. Okay. So, if you put in a variable called time, that will give your level a quantum time. At least in some of the dialogues it will. I will fix the others shortly. Oh, I didn't actually show it off. And there you go. The quantum time is now 15 seconds. There is a time that is better than quantum time. If you want to set a value for that, make it time 2 instead of time. So, that is, long story short, How to make custom levels in Quaternion. I think I'm going to try really quickly to see if I can fix the bug, and I will, if successful, cut to me having fixed the bug. Alright, well, it appears that I have in fact fixed the bug. So if you take a look here, first off, apparently custom level example is a name that's too long, which is kind of funny. But if we open up the level now, you could see that in the menu that I actually had a best time saved for the level. We're going to see if we can actually improve on that best time even further. Best time's about 12 seconds. Oh man, it's going to be hard to beat that. Boom! And there you go, we've got a new best time. It's actually displaying correctly on this menu. Okay, so, long story short, that is how to make a level for Quaternion. So, that's all I'm going to say for now. There are obviously a lot of more specialized things that would require more specialized knowledge. For example, how do you have music in the level? Actually, I should probably explain how to have music in the level. But if you want to have custom music, obviously that requires a lot more specialized knowledge. Custom textures that aren't just textures that are already in the game. Obviously, a lot of what would make a good Quaternion custom level would be introducing new features, and that's going to require some coding experience. But that being said, I think it would be a great way to learn how to write Marble Blast mod code. Even though Quaternion isn't exactly, just regular Marble Blast, there's a lot of interesting stuff about it. Right, so the way you're going to add music to the level is you use this function called fade to music. And so I'm going to just add that in here. I'm going to actually use onload. Actually, what does... yeah, I'll use onload. Fade to music, level local, and I'm going to call it test.og. And for the music, I'll just copy the music from security checkpoint. Oh, that's right, it's just music.og. Wonderful. The version of this that I release might not look exactly like the version you're seeing. I might change the names of a couple things so it's not just called test. And I might fix the fact that it runs off the menu. And there you go. Now we've got music. Oh, can I do it? Oh! Okay, I'm clearly having too much fun with this. That's all I'm going to say for now. Everybody who's watched this, thank you so much for watching it. And I hope that you folks have a wonderful day.